No, I worked out.
We should mute ourselves?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely once we get started, I feel like we could maybe give people another minute just in case. And then I'm wondering actually if anyone would be interested in just a round of introductions so that we could meet the other people in the room. Great.
Hi, I'm Sora's dad.
Hi, Sora's dad.
Peter Guthrie.
Sora's dad.
Hi, so good to meet you.
I guess I'll go. I'm Jason Tucker. I'm an admissions representative at Oxbow and an alum of OS20, and I'm super excited to hear about all these projects today.
Hi, this is Marilyn and Ken,
Hi.
grandparents of Billie Wynn.
Hi, Billy.
Just say. Are we? Oh, hi. This is Dana. That's Danny. There's Toby.
Hi.
That's Billy's family.
Hi, I'm a friend of Billy's. I'm Tasha.
Hi, Tasha. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Your birthday today?
It was 2 days ago.
Oh, okay. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy late birthday.
I'm Kelly Bitzer, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Advancement in Communications for the Oxbow School.
Hi, I'm John Blum. I'm Alexander Blum's dad.
Hi.
Very excited to be here. I was at school in February, early, and had a quick walk through with Alexandra before we went to dinner.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Very, very excited to be here.
Well, I see some other faces in the room. Feel free to introduce yourselves if you'd like. Otherwise, we'll get started in the next 30 seconds.
Hi, we're Sophia's parents, Andrew and Sophia. Andrew and Michelle.
Happy to be here.
We love Oxbow.
Oh, you're coming.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Chris Thorson, and I teach painting at Oxbow School, and it's definitely a surprise to see you all this way instead of on campus celebrating final show. But I also think that OS42 goes down in history. We're so proud of you for your resilience and your creativity. I'm going to try not to get too emotional, but it's been really great seeing you persevere and seeing how much is inside you. And it's a privilege to see the world from your point of view, and it really makes me hopeful for the future. Even on my sort of hard days, you really, each of you have brought such a light into my life. So I thank you for that. And without further ado, let's get started. Our first presenter is Alex, and Larissa is going to screen share a few images and a portion of Alex's artist statement. And now's the time to mute yourselves while Alex kind of talks a little bit, and then you can unmute yourself to answer questions, or you can feel free to type them in the chats and Alex will, or one of us will read them for her.
Okay.
And also, wait 1 second, let me just share it really quick, Alex. All right.
Oh, here I am. Okay.
All right, Alex Blum.
Hi.
Okay. I often ask myself, what does being awake really mean? Throughout my life, I've always been gripped by two different worlds, my dream world and reality. My life is colored by a lingering inability to define, I think that's what it says. Let me move this. Between the two. A red notebook sits on my nightstand filled with scribbles, outlining outrageous, vivid dreams. Through this project, I began to make sense of the madness that erupts out of the subconscious by interviewing teenagers on the roles of dreams in their lives.
So Alex, would you mind describing your film and your process in a couple of sentences?
Yeah, sure. So basically my film, I didn't have a camera and I'm not at my house right now, so I kind of, at the beginning, I was leaning more towards like working with painting, and I wanted to paint a bunch of different paintings, just inspired by dreams that I've had and my friends have had, because I did a bunch of interviews about dreams and pandemic dreams, and I also did a bunch of research on that. But my teachers were like, "It's okay, you don't have a camera. You can make art with your phone." And I was really nervous about that, and nervous about seeing myself in front of the camera, because I'm always taking pictures and like videoing other people. So I just didn't really want to do it at first. But I kind of like confronted my fears in that way by using myself as my medium, and turning myself into a character that I had written and kind of built. And so it kind of just follows like a bunch of her different like dream sequences, and like that inability that I just described to kind of like choose a world that you want to live in, the dream world or reality. And so like in a way it was cathartic for me to like speak about kind of like what I personally go through, but like from a point of view of like a made up character. So kind of took it off of being about me, but more about just this world that I'd created, kind of. Yeah.
So I have a question that I'm going to read from Jason. How was the way you shot the piece altered by your use of a phone as a camera? Did you like it? Would you shoot another film this way?
So I'd never like done kind of videos of myself before, and I know like with a camera, like a Canon camera or a Nikon, there's a lot of different things that you have to worry about focusing and everything kind of like framing perfectly. But with my phone, it was like super simple. I had Patty Ann, my teacher, helped me with this app that is like a cinematic app where you can video. So I used that, and it was actually like it helped me focus more on the composition and like what I was actually doing in the image than like on working the camera. So that ended up being helpful, and the quality was actually like a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So I definitely would again. It was called, I think it's called Filmic Pro. It's like, it costs, I think you have to pay a little bit, but yeah, Filmic Pro. And it has like all of the focuses and like brightness and everything that you can adjust on there. Isabel said, would you call this a self-portrait or a portrait of society today? Definitely a little bit of both. It kind of began out of a self-portrait and just me kind of like making different visual, I guess, like a story through visuals of things that I'd experienced, and like common dreams as well, like dreams of falling, dreams of almost dying but kind of catching yourself, dreams of being in the water. Like a lot of what I incorporated was like from the interviews that I had with people, and I learned a lot about the people around me, because more when I was observing my dreams, it was just like about what I think, and I think like getting other people, like learning what other people think as well about dreams is really interesting. Where did I pull my dream research from? So for my interviews, I just interviewed kids from like New York and California, around my age, my friends, and I asked a bunch of questions about like the role that dreams play in their lives. Have they ever lucid dreamed? Do their dreams scare them? How do they interpret them? Or do they just kind of see them as these really far off, kind of vivid, I guess, fever dreams? But my research on dreams, a lot of it came from like National Geographic. And if you search up pandemic dreams, like there are so many articles by every major publication right now on like dream content. And there's been like a bunch of recent like polls and everything about dreams and people, like their biggest nightmares and fears kind of becoming a reality. Yeah. I don't know if that answers it correctly, but you can tell me if I'm not. Okay. Who were my cinematic or artistic inspirations? Definitely at first, when I wanted to do my final project, I wanted to do a photo series, and my biggest inspiration is Cindy Sherman. Like I've always been obsessed with her. I met her when I was really little at a gallery, and I just like wanted to be her when I grew up. So I definitely pulled a lot of inspiration from her. I have her book right here of her film stills, which is like her black and white photos that are my favorite ever. Also a bunch of different dream sequences in movies. Like, yeah, I just kind of compiled a lot of different things I was thinking, and also like my kind of dreams that I'd written down in my journal and everything. That also pulled inspiration from that. Has dreaming changed since working on this project? I've definitely become more aware of my dreams, and I've been writing them down more often. And I came across in my research like a bunch of different tips on lucid dreaming, like drink 3 glasses of water before you go to bed so you wake up. Or like there are apps to like wake you up in the middle of your cycle, like the REM cycle or whatever. But definitely I've been trying to like decide whether I think lucid dreaming is trying to escape my dreams or if it's actually productive. So that's something that I've been going through a bit recently, just trying to think about. You say that dreams are colorful and reality is black and white. What is that color? Different realms of reality. Yeah, so in my film, like there were kind of 2 different parts that I did. So the first part was just my character Isadora sitting down and talking about her dreams to herself, kind of, but just sitting in front of the camera. And so those scenes I have in black and white because like her dreams are so much more vivid than her reality is. And so I think that's a statement on how monotonous real life and reality can be. But I also kind of like interspersed the black and white and the color so that you would kind of like be taken from the present to the past like very often throughout the short, so that it's kind of hard to tell like which realm you're in. So yeah, different realms of reality. Yeah, I don't know if I answered that, but maybe. Okay, in the first image, view in the bedroom, did each of the objects on the table have a meaning? I really like that. I took my bedroom, I took everything off of all the walls, I took everything off of every single surface and redid it so I could live in this brain of my character. And so I like put all of these objects that I would just imagine her owning like on the table, just so I could wake up and see it and kind of live it for a little bit. Had a little Heath Ledger moment, but I didn't go crazy, don't worry. But yes, everything on the table did mean something. And I know in art, like I use candles and light a lot. And I know in art sometimes that talks about like the fragility of life. And so in some way I was kind of playing on that. Yeah, so the objects like did have meaning. I definitely wanted, like, you would have to watch it a few times to like understand exactly what I was trying to say, but yeah. Okay, from a psychological standpoint, what did you learn through your interviews and how did that alter the arc of this work? So there's like a few voiceovers throughout the film, and those are taken from my interviews. Like I just got the permission to like speak my friend's dreams a bit in the video, and I think it my interviews were super interesting because I feel like talking about people's dreams, like when someone tells you I had a really crazy dream, it kind of like automatically turns your brain off, and I think a lot of people back off and are just like not necessarily super engaged after that. But I think like having, especially in isolation, like having this pause to sit and think about what's happening with your subconscious is just like so important. And I think hopefully I prompted some people around me to do that, and that definitely was inspirational for me. Yeah. It seems there are a lot of spaces, doorways, underwater, etc. Can you talk about your use of ideas of in between? So a lot of my images were kind of about falling and about openness, but also being confined. And I really like the use of like shadows and, as Chris was saying, doorways. And I kind of use that to show like how confined she is at times, but how like your mind is just so free when you dream. There's nothing that can stop it. Like unless you lucid dream or try to interfere with it, like it's one of the only realms of like the person that can't be tampered with. And I think people like strive all of the time for control over everything, and your brain kind of tries to tell you something when you're not exactly like able to control all of that, if that makes sense. And a lot of people think that your brain is like so turned off when you're asleep, but it's so awake and functioning so fast. And so that's something that really interested me. Okay, last question. The whole film was so abstract. I've never really seen anything like it. Did you purposely leave it up for interpretation from the audience? So I definitely struggled with this a little bit because in my head, everything really made so much sense. And since I was the only person working on it, I kind of knew what I was making, but I didn't really know exactly how other people would take it until they saw the full finished thing, and I'd edited everything. So at the start I had a super like clear script and whole plan, but I made it more like choppy and more abstract, like you said, really so that I could let people kind of decipher it for themselves and see what they wanted to see in the character, because that's definitely what I did. It was a portrait of me, and I think she could definitely be a portrait of you as well. Yeah. Okay, so next person is Amaya. Thank you guys for the questions.
Hi, I'm Amaya. I'm from Yonkers, New York. Okay, I'll read my quote. For my final project, I decided to dive into the history of photography to answer the question, what is truth in photography? During a time when society is so dependent on technology, especially during a pandemic, I wanted to explore how I could capture photographs that were still meaningful and authentic. To me, truth in photography means that Photoshop functions, such as saturation, contrast, and the smooth and blur tools are used minimally or not at all. Okay, so what I did for my project was I actually did photo shoots with my friends and some of my peers from Oxbow as well about over Zoom. And so I had my digital camera that I used, but I took pictures of my actual computer screen instead of just taking screenshots, because I thought that would just give a better quality image. And so even though the images are somewhat pixelated, like my goal was to kind of try and produce an image that could be truthful or authentic, even with all of these digital walls. Because for me, I was looking through my eyes, but then the lens of the camera, but then like my computer screen, and like it was all of these different walls kind of blocking me from my my friends and like taking pictures. So that was kind of interesting. And so what I did was I told people to kind of dress how they thought like they saw themselves, or like just if they wanted to represent themselves as like an outfit or like makeup, to do that. And so I kind of just went through everybody and had them either do poses from different photographs that I saw when I was looking through different centuries of photography. And I just had them do different poses, but then sometimes I kind of caught them in between poses. Specifically for this one, this was something that I saw online, and it was someone naked on top of a table doing this pose. And so for me, I thought this was a good way to represent kind of quarantine and like how that makes each individual person feel. And so I kind of framed it with my computer to kind of give a sense of entrapment, but also kind of emphasize how everything is digital. And on the floor, she has her different art materials, but also her different schoolwork and academic materials like books and pens. And for me, my goal was kind of to just get raw images. And so I only cropped and straightened the photos. I didn't do anything with them. And for me, that felt a little strange because I usually don't do that. I usually like higher the saturation a little bit or like contrast a little bit. But I really wanted to focus on kind of just like what my camera gave me, what my computer gave me, and just sit with that and be happy with that, because it was just something so pure. And I've always been obsessed with how Photoshop is so mainstream, in that if you look up on the internet different portraits or different landscapes, they just look very unrealistic. And so I wanted to kind of go back to the original like definition of photography for documentation and observation, and kind of just try and understand like a frozen moment. So I would just take a picture, look at it, think, what does this mean? What am I telling with this? Because I really think it's important to tell somewhat of a story, or at least intrigue your audience so that they ask questions based on the photographs you take. And so that was just me. This was just me kind of experimenting with how I can do that, even though the times were completely digital because of the pandemic, but also kind of just stepping back from what's considered normal, and not using Photoshop. Question. Do you feel like the Zoom calls were a part of the piece? Did you have conversations with your subject about the subject matter? Well, since it was with friends, it was kind of an interesting dynamic in that I would ask them to do certain things, or ask them to show me around the room. But then in between, it was kind of like they were posing and I was taking pictures, but it was also kind of just a casual conversation of like, oh, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. But also the first photo shoot that I did do, my friend was kind of like, this is awkward. And she was like very open with explaining that to me. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, because it's kind of like she was posing alone in her room, kind of just staring at her laptop. And so for her, that was just weird because I usually take photos of her like at school or something like that. And so being in different places and like just having like a small little device as a barrier between the two people, that was something very interesting. But it also made communication kind of difficult because sometimes the person's phone or computer would be in a weird position and I'd have to try and explain how they could move it while the video that I was receiving was like a mirror image. So I had to like switch the directions in my head. So that was an interesting experience. I hope that answers your question, Larissa. Let me see. How is the process of collaborating over Zoom different than a live photo shoot? Well, as I said, it was kind of, instead of me being like, oh, do this, because sometimes I like go over and I like move them exactly how I might want it. And so it was kind of weird having to kind of give into the digital experience in the sense that it was very difficult for me to communicate how to position themselves, but also how to position their phones or their computers, because depending on the surface and depending on the signal, it was very complicated to figure out, but also trying to figure out like different places in the room, because I went in not knowing what the rooms looked like. And so I would kind of be like, oh, give me a tour of the room, and they'd kind of show me around. And so I think it was actually more collaborative in a way, because it was more of a conversation, because it was less like, okay, I'm going to move your arm. And it was me kind of communicating, can you do this for me? And if they didn't understand, I would like show them a picture, like, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, do you understand? And that was a new struggle that I've never had to encounter. You say that computers have corrupted the art of photography, but at the same time, the current state of the world has forced you to use a computer in your process. Is this inevitable? Can this corruption really be reversed? That's a good question. Let me think about that. Well, originally for my project, I actually wanted to do film photography and work in the darkroom, because I have never really had a hands-on experience with the photos that I produce, because my camera automatically uploads them onto my phone. I just have to plug it into my computer and then everything is set and done. And so that's kind of where my idea of authenticity came from. And so having to kind of talk about authenticity while still being forced to use my computer, that was something that I initially struggled with a lot at the beginning of my project. And it was very disappointing for me, because I felt like I wasn't really doing 100% of what I wish I could be doing, in the sense that like I felt that because it was through Zoom and through the computer, through my digital camera, there were just so many layers of technology that I wasn't even sure if what I was producing was necessarily authentic or truthful. Like, for example, this image, like the subject's computer froze, and so you can see the face that she was making before and like the kind of transition. And so I thought this looked really cool, but I did have kind of an issue mentally, like trying to figure out like, oh, is this capturing what I want it to be? And can this corruption? I mean, I think that that the digital world is kind of wrapped in with photography now, and that I think Photoshop can be used to make beautiful things. The other day I made a modification of the medical symbol to send as a thank you to hospital workers. And so I think that there are a lot of benefits, and therefore it's not necessarily corruption like completely as Photoshop. I just think like when you're using Photoshop to make something look better in a sense that it just, the colors are more exaggerated and everything is a lot more defined, but that's not actually how it looked when you took the picture, even when you saw it with your eyes. I think that's difficult because a lot of people don't really understand what the limits are, because limits haven't really been established unless you're submitting something to a photography contest and it says you can't do this, or this, and you have to send in this type of file. But I think that the photography community, but also the art community in general, should really emphasize going back to its original meaning and kind of just remembering that photography was initially for documentation and observation and kind of just understanding like the world in a different lens, literally. And so I think that more conversations need to be had about this, because a lot of them are had because photojournalism, like that's an issue very prominent in photojournalism, but I think in general in photography it should be addressed, even though, and I feel like it doesn't have enough attention. So I would hope that with more conversations about it that this would change more. I hope that answers your question, Billy. How did your interaction with the models in posing and lighting differ using Zoom? It was hard in the sense that the lighting of my room determined how I would get the picture, but also the lighting of where they were also determined it. So I would have to be like, oh, do you have a light to turn on? Or I would have to close my blinds or make manual edits on my camera to kind of adjust to the lighting. But I think using Zoom was an extra challenge because I feel like photography, like especially portrait photography, is kind of one-on-one. And it's very personal because it's a portrait. It's of one person. Most of the time it's close up. And so it definitely was a strange experience. And I think for lighting specifically, like sometimes I would have to ask them like, oh, can you go outside? Can you face the window? Because the quality of the image, not even on my camera, but just on my computer, because of Zoom, the darker it was, the more digital noise there was. And so trying to figure out how to eliminate that without knowing, oh, I can just edit that out in Photoshop, that was extremely challenging, especially when it was a rainier day. While the images are friends, did you ever feel as if the image was autobiographical? That's a good question. I never really thought about it like that. I do think for some of the images, they kind of represent my feelings at the moment, specifically the one that was shown before with the girl kind of just crouched in a ball on the couch. That definitely is how I felt this entire quarantine. And like for me, she was in such an open space, like high ceilings, everything was white, so it looked really big, but then she was kind of just in a ball on the couch. And for me, that's very representative of how I feel, and that I have all of this time to do things because there's kind of there was less class time, and now classes are over. And so I'm going to have so much time to do whatever I want, but I still feel physically trapped because I'm not allowed to go outside of my house. But I also feel artistically trapped in that as a portrait photographer, not being able to go outside or like go to my friend's house and do a photo shoot is very difficult. And I feel like a lot of artists and a lot of people in general just feel really boxed in quarantine, because it just feels like everything is so limited. But at the same time, there's so much that you can do. You just have to get the motivation to get up and do something. Did your research change any of your ideas? Oop, I lost the question. Did your research change any of your ideas about how you view photography? I absolutely loved my research because it just made me appreciate just the process of how photography has developed. And it's very interesting because even the first developed photograph version, the daguerreotype, some people still practice that. Like, there are ways you can still do that. And I was just very impressed by the things that you can do without using anything digital. There were a lot of experimental images that I found of photographers from Germany and France who would kind of play with lighting and play with their subject. And so it would look like something that in modern day would probably be photoshopped, but in reality, it was just multiple images layered over each other and kind of developed into one, but that was all manual. And so it definitely gave me a lot more appreciation for what I am doing, but just for everyone in the past who has kind of developed it. And now it's a lot easier to do because of digital photography. But I think the fact that a lot of people are sticking to black and white film, I think is really interesting, because a few artists that I looked at, they kind of thought that black and white was, yes, artificial because we see in color, but at the same time, it kind of makes you focus on different things because the color isn't there. It was very eye-opening. How do you think photography can be used to truthfully capture this moment in history?
Hey, Amaya, before you go on, we only have time for one more question for you for the next. And I think this question really stood out to me. Do you mind if I read it? And then
yeah, sure.
You can introduce the next person. Sorry to interrupt you. Okay. Because you directed your models and sometimes their environments, would you consider your photographs truly authentic? Is there really such a thing as truth in photography?
Okay. Well, that's something I kind of questioned myself. But I think for me, I was kind of looking at photographs from 19th and 20th century that I thought really told a story. And so I was trying to kind of emulate that with the different resources that I had. And so I think it's a different representation of authenticity, but I like to think that even though I am kind of copying an older photograph, I think that it's kind of just experimental in the sense that it's hard to say if there is 100% truth in something, because there's always the bias of you wanting a picture to look a certain way, or the lens of your camera kind of being manipulated in one way or another. But I do think truth in photography essentially is kind of capturing a moment that makes the person looking at it kind of just think about other things. And that specifically for this image, like I was hoping people would ask kind of, oh, where is she? What is she doing? What happened that her face looks like that? Why is she dressed like that? Is that representative of her? Is that supposed to match the background? And things like that. And so next we have Billie.
Hi, I'm Billie. I'm from New York. Okay, so as a society, we focus on health merely from a physical standpoint. There's an emotional toll that is not acknowledged alongside disease. My work was created to access my own perspective on my dad's disease. Prior to undertaking this project, I hadn't realized that I could uncover my side of the story. I explored a variety of questions. How can a disease affect a group of people? Where does someone who witnesses sickness fall into the system of disease? Do generational differences within a group affect people differently? This is personally important to me because my dad has Parkinson's disease, so it is prevalent in my daily life. And I wanted to consider how this disease has affected me. I did 4 self-portraits for my art piece. And so this is it. So each one is like a different version of me, and they each represent a different aspect of like a symptom of disease or what it could look like to experience it. So they're also all inspired by different artists and different styles of art that I like. And it's an oil painting. So like the top right, the blue one, there are like batteries on the head, which is something that my dad has for Parkinson's. And so it was showing like a version of myself with that. And it's inspired by Marlene Dumas. And then the top left is inspired by George Baselitz, and it's supposed to represent like a shakiness and like kind of like a messiness with like the whole topic in general. And then bottom left is inspired by Francesco Clemente, and I'm bald, and like the hair from the one above is kind of coming on me, showing like the one thing that like I don't have is like always like I'm being reminded of it in a way. And then bottom right is supposed to just be like myself with no alteration, and it's inspired by Jenny Saville. And so also that one has a black shirt on because white kind of represents like this pureness, and all the figures except for the bottom left, they like have visible symptoms, so they can't really hide from the reality. And like I feel like that's living in a pure way, and the one on the bottom right is almost like hiding from the sickness, and like they have like more of a reason to like want to blend in a way. So I tried to like, I didn't want one of them to stand out as much, but in the end I figured it made most sense to kind of like create a contrast between like what's internal and the external. You can see up close. It was my first time doing an oil painting, so it was like definitely tricky to figure out how to like work with the different styles and all. I also tried to play with like different types of proportions as well. I didn't want them to all look like the exact same, and I also didn't want them to look at the audience, because I feel like within me, like an audience can't really like see what's going on, so I didn't want them to like allow that access. Like they all have relations with like between themselves. But I wrote a script for the project. Why red? Well, I really liked this piece by George Baselitz, who's the top left art, that I was inspired by that style. I've always really liked the combination of red and black as well, and I think that it kind of adds this like chaotic aspect. It's just kind of like these 4 figures that all represent me being surrounded by like the world and like this chaos. And also it kind of relates to like sickness in the way that like blood or like something that could be a little bit more like vulnerable. And I tried to make sure that they all had the same red, the same shade, because I wanted to like do 4 different portraits, but also have them all be one painting as together. That was another thing, like if I'm just going to do one big painting or 4 small ones. How did you prepare to make these paintings? What was your sketching or planning process like? Well, I like, as you know, Chris, my paint arrived like the last week of final project. And so I didn't have any materials, and I was just like sketching a bunch every day of just different versions of my face. And I was just doing like a lot of research with each artist. And so like, for example, with Francesco Clemente, bottom left, that like style, he emphasizes a lot of features. So I thought it would be cool to like emphasize the head and like be most proud of it in a way. So like in my sketches, I tried out a lot of different variations and like what feature to be emphasized and like all that. Because you were working with oil paint for the first time, did you find difficulties in translating your ideas into your paintings? If so, how did they add to your piece in the end? Yes. Since the paint doesn't dry as fast as what I'm used to, a lot of smudging happened and a lot of like blending of colors, like the white shirt. It was very gray at times, and like that was definitely tricky to get like the richness and like each color and not just have it all blend in the end. Like if I just kept on working, I kind of had to like say I had to stop at a certain point for each. So that was hard. But I think at the end, like each layer kind of really added to it. Did you work from photographs or memory? Kind of both. Like I took photographs to get the original placement, like little sketches on the canvas, but then I kind of put them away and like I added all the color and all that from my own. And like obviously the upside down one, I just kind of like flipped the thing and then messed around with the hair. Why did you decide to write a script as your paper? Did the script give you a voice you felt like was kind of silenced before this project? Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember Larissa had said, like, she read mine over and she said, like, it felt like I was just talking to myself in a way. And, like, kind of purposely, like, in my mind, I have, like, the angel and the devil and, like, all the different people that are interacting to, like, you know, create what I'm going to say out loud. And so I think, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it came into play, especially my subconscious part, my internal dialogue. That was like a big part of my project because it's all the things like I can't really say out loud. Well, I think I'm gonna introduce Sophia, timing wise and stuff. 2 more questions? Oh, okay. Okay, let me see where I was. Okay. When you said that the 4 figures are all looking away from the audience in order to maintain a sense of privacy from the viewer, does that also function as an act of resistance to the human need for understanding? Yeah, I think so, because I think, like, I've always had trouble, like, talking about these types of things, because, like, for people to think that, like, they get it, or, like, for someone to be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense because of this and this, and it's just, like, I can't make sense of certain things in my own head, and people trying to, like, create conclusions for me, it's, like, makes me, like, want to, like, hide in my own thing and not figure out what's going on. And so I think by just like figuring it out for myself, like within myself, like that is portrayed here rather than like people trying to like do that for me. Had you painted using other types of paint? How did you like painting in oil? I've painted before, but I've never really like done a painting or like a real portrait. I've worked with acrylic, and I think I've always wanted to do an oil painting. I think I'll definitely like do this again. It's like a new medium I would want to work with because there's a certain like texture and thickness that I could create, but also like I can make it smooth, like the difference between the 2 on the bottom, for example. And I think there's just a lot more like access. Like acrylic, it's just kind of like the way it turns out, the way it turns out, whether it dries in time or whatever. For this, like, it's really intentional. And I think for a project, like for what I did, it really worked out. Okay, so now I'm gonna introduce Sophia from New York.
Hi, I'm Sophia. So this piece examines the discredited intelligence of innocence and the flaws in how childhood dissolves in the hands of knowledge. Why, as we are supposed to be growing wiser and learning more, do we inhibit our minds with rules and boundaries? Why are we allowed to do and say certain things as a child, but not as a teenager or adult? What does innocence excuse? Is knowledge always power, or does it blind us to the freedom of exploration? These are examples of questions I examined in an attempt to critique the distrust held in ideas generated from kids. Why do thoughts increase in value when they originate from adults, when some of the world's most revolutionary ideas have come from those who never stopped dreaming like children? So the general theme of my piece, which you got from that blurb, is innocence in childhood. And so I decided to use a combination of technical pencil drawings, and then I worked with these like weird paint sticks that I just happened to have in my house when I was a kid. And this final piece is not what I expected it to be at all. I started by drawing like individual eyes and lips and things like that. And I knew I wanted to use the human face to serve as a sort of reflection, with the pencil drawings being figurative of the adults and the paint sticks representing the children, and kind of the interaction between the two playing as an adult looking back at its childhood self and longing for that. And I also wanted the viewer to question in the end which of the two uses of the materials were more successful. How I was taught to create art technically versus what I just did freely, and questioning, if the ways we're taught to do things are really the most successful in the end. So I ended up with this kind of collage of the two. And yeah, it was definitely unexpected, but I think that again plays into the whole idea of my project, in the sense of seeing where your mind takes itself on its own without being told, or without a lot of outside influence. And then this next picture is from my research paper, which took the form of a children's book for adults. And in that, I again questioned the definition of innocence and kind of did a deep dive into some of the questions I read before, about why we don't do certain things we used to and how we're inhibited. Okay. Do you think in a world without the corruptions of innocence, humans could stay childlike forever? Is it natural to keep that innocence? Is growing up inevitable? I think certain aspects of growing up are definitely inevitable, but I think the ways in which we've been taught to grow are definitely largely influenced by our surroundings. And, I think one of the ways which we grow is how we learn from our peers. So for example, at Oxbow, like I found myself growing a lot there, but not because I was, told by parents or teachers to act in a certain way. It was more, learning from myself as a result of the people around me. How do you think your own childhood influenced this piece? So for part of my research, I did kind of just like a personal brainstorm and journal entry, I guess you could say, because I wanted to focus more on personal experiences and innocence rather than how the brain physically works. And so I think I focused on parts of my childhood where you could say I was forced to grow up faster, or I've always been, something people always commented about me was that I was mature, and I never really understood it, because for me, I just thought I was another kid, didn't really make a difference. But I think looking back on those times in my life where I've had to, like I said before, like grow up a little bit faster, I suppose you could say, and like take responsibility. I think that definitely informed this piece and how, you know, that makes me think now, like, does that now prevent me from, you know, being more carefree in certain instances because I have more knowledge about what it's like to be more grown up and have more responsibility. Why did you use the classic kid crayon colors of red, yellow, blue, and green? Haha. So I mean, it wasn't really intentional. I think that was more just a stylistic choice and an aesthetic. But again, I think now that you mention it, like going back to those colors again is like looking at things in the simplest form before they've been mixed or altered. So I didn't realize it, but that does play in very well to my theme. Do you try to hold on to your innocence? If so, how do you? I mean, I think in some ways I try to hold on to my innocence in the sense that I don't want to grow up too fast and I want to make sure I can enjoy certain freedoms I have now being a teenager and not having certain responsibilities at this age. But I don't think it's necessarily something that's entirely in my hands. I think innocence is often something that unfortunately is taken from kids. And like one of the things that I studied was knowledge and how you can't unknow something. Like once you know how something works or a fact or anything, you can't erase that from your mind. So also looking at how like we as a society and looking at kids now, especially like in a time with Corona and this pandemic, how, you know, having that knowledge that can't really be erased can be used in like a more productive way. Which did you enjoy creating the most, the panels with the paint sticks or pencil? Definitely the paint sticks, 100%. I talk about these paint sticks a lot, but they're really fun. And I feel like I've always felt a lot of pressure when I'm using pencil to like make things really technical and make them look aesthetically pleasing. And I feel like I have to try hard for that. But when I was just using the paint sticks, it really just like came freely. There was no like sketching, no planning, like whatever happened, that's what it was. And I really enjoyed doing that rather than like sitting for hours to end up with like one eye. And then when I put it in the collage in the end, it kind of disappeared to me. So like that also plays into it not being as enjoyable. I think this is going to be the last question. Do you think this idea of innocence in childhood is allowed in art? Can you find it even in the more technical styles of art? I definitely think it's allowed in art, and I think the art community is a place where innocence can be reserved more so maybe than in other spaces, because I think the art world is very accepting and looking for innovation. You know, in a lot of the ways our world works, we're stuck in how we do things and we like that safety. But I think in the art world, experimentation is something that's still valued as very exciting. And so I think it's a really good example of where you can find people still valuing innocence and not knowing in a sense of what they're going to create. Okay, so next we have Sora, otherwise known as Sorrel.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Okay, hey guys. All right, I'm Sora from New York. I have always been so captivated by the movies and shows I saw on screen. I would diligently wait for that perfect moment when two characters fall in love or when the protagonist finally reaches their goal. I think part of why I love movies so much is that I long for my life to be one. But why? Why is real life seemingly much worse than an illusion on screen? My project explores the dynamics between the spectator and performer within theater, dance, television, movies, etc. There's an imbalance of power between the audience and performers as there's an exchange of information. I would like to play with the idea of switching the system by placing the viewers into a position of momentary discomfort. I'm trying to uncover ways in which our daily lives are tinted by the spectacle presented on screen and how we can become active participants rather than passive audience members. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to just kind of explore this interaction between like the audience and the viewer and see what way that is kind of charged and how the exchange of information is also an exchange of power. And I wanted to do that through dance because I used to dance a lot. And so it was kind of a form of like me reconnecting to that past self, I guess. And I also think dance is a really important tool in storytelling. And that's also what movies do. And so, yeah, I was like in quarantine, probably as many of you guys are. And I was like watching all of these shows and my favorite movies. And it just made me wonder why I connected so deeply to the characters that I saw on screen. And I wanted to kind of explore that as like my own kind of identity quest and self-discovery, I guess. So I made a video that was a compilation of all my favorite movies and TV shows. And I choreographed a dance to the scenes and the dialogue from the characters, which was largely inspired by Crystal Pite's work. She has one piece called The Statement, where it's like solely dialogue. There's no music at all, and she choreographed like an entire piece to that. So I wanted to find like the rhythm and kind of cadence in these characters' voices and choreograph to that, like trying to find, I guess, musicality in things that we don't normally see as being musical. Yes, I don't really know what else to say, but yeah. Okay. Do you want the imbalance between audience members and performance to be balanced? Will that defeat the specialness of a performance? Yeah, this is one of the things that I was super interested in, because like this whole thing of like the audience, like without an audience, there is no performance. And that plays such a huge part in our daily lives. Like we think that things aren't legitimate because no one is watching, because there's no audience. So I feel like I wanted to keep that imbalance between audience members and performers, but also switch it. So like have pockets of imbalance, but also moments where it is balanced. So I kind of like, there's this one moment in my video where there's no music and it's like just my feet. And I kind of wanted that to be like a disruption and a form of resistance to the common like thread of the video that was playing before. Yes, okay. How long did it take you to choreograph? Have you choreographed before? It didn't take me that long. I don't know. I have choreographed before. I made a video kind of similar to this with my friends for a school project. But it didn't take me that long. What did your research look like? Can you talk about your play? Well, Larissa, my research kind of looked like a lot of French philosophy and very dense reading that Larissa sent me. So I was kind of trying to like pick apart and decode what all those French philosophers were saying. And I just decided to write a script for my form of research because I wanted to kind of go into like the actual structure of these movies and TV shows that I was so like captivated by. So my play included a bunch of different characters who all had different beliefs and opinions about what it means to be a spectator and what it means to be a passive audience member and an active audience member. And they kind of were arguing and discussing in the play and the script that I wrote all these different contrasting ideas about performance. I love the moments you chose. Was it easy to choose them or did you have to search? I think it was really easy because for me, it's like when I think of my favorite movies and the scenes, like they come so quickly to me. And I think that's what I was really interested in, like why those moments stuck with me and why I remembered them so often. I think it's because like I see them reflected in my daily life and like I see myself reflected in the characters on screen. talk about your relationship to the love stories we saw on screen. It seems like these stories, the office love story between Pam and Jim, for example, have become internalized within many different people. Yeah, when I was making this video, I realized that a lot of them were like very romantic love scenes. And I don't know, I feel like that resonates with a lot of people just because there's this illusion of like what the perfect life is, and in that includes achieving love or like getting love as if it's this object to be attained, I guess. But I think for me, choosing those scenes, like those scenes felt like the culmination almost of those characters' growth, so it felt just like the perfect moment because it felt like I was growing up with all these characters and suddenly like they had come together. So I felt like I wanted to choose that moment. How long did it take to edit? Well, I love editing, so it didn't take that long. It took like a day because I had created a skeleton basically, or like a first draft of the project, and then I went out and like filmed better quality videos and just replaced the old one with the new ones. When making this, would you rather be in front of it? Behind the camera? I would definitely rather be behind the camera. I don't like watching myself dance because I'm just thinking of like the millions of different corrections that I can give myself. And it was hard because my mom and my aunt were filming it. So I felt really bad and I was directing them and telling them how to shoot my video, but I don't know. I just like wanted it to turn out a certain way. And I kind of just had to accept that like whichever way it turned out, like I could deal with that in the editing process, I guess. Okay. I don't know if I should answer any more questions. One more. Okay. How do you think your performance would have changed if you had been alone and not on camera? Don't really know. Wait, Sophia, what do you mean?
Like, I know we've talked, I mean, you've told me about how sometimes, like, it's hard for you to, like, dance in front of people, and, like, you love to, like, go and dance by yourself. So, like, how does being on camera and, like, knowing that you're interacting with someone, like, change how you let yourself do that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for explaining. It kind of goes back to what Billie was saying with her painting. It's like, it almost feels like an invasion of privacy when there's a camera on you. And it definitely does like set up this system of surveillance where you feel like you're being surveyed and judged. And I feel like a lot of judgment, like I placed a lot of judgment on myself just knowing that I was being filmed. So I think it just put a lot of pressure on the whole situation. But yes. Okay. Larissa says answer your dad's questions too. Oh. In your piece, you're both the spectator and the one being watched. What are your feelings in both positions? I think discomfort would be the biggest feeling, and I don't completely mind that because I think that's what the whole purpose of this was supposed to be, was placing the spectator in a position of discomfort. And so, yes, it was uncomfortable to watch myself dancing, but I think it was also a really good learning experience to like put myself in that position of discomfort and like to take the power away from myself in a way. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Vaughn, who's from Texas.
Hi, I'm Vaughn from Austin, Texas. So let's see. The Ignorant Presence of America, abbreviated as TIPA, is a brand promoting people to do better. It encourages us through the promotion of a climate-friendly lifestyle and TIPA item purchase. 80% of profits are donated to nrdc.org, whose mission statement claims, "We combine the power of more than 3 million members and online activists with the expertise of some 700 scientists, lawyers, and policy advocates across the globe to ensure that the rights of all people to the air, the water, and the wild are available." Okay. TIPA makes being charitable all that easier. So my project is mostly focused on getting young people, specifically like teenagers and young adults, to contribute to climate change prevention. And I decided to do this through making a website, um, advertising like sorry, advertising like different like advertising to young people. Sorry, something got me off. Let's see. So so I made the website with I coded it in Dreamweaver, which took up most of my time. But the idea of the website was sort of just to get young people to sorry, there's like a lot of noises in my house right now. To get it's mostly sorry, I just got shaken up. It's mostly it's targeting young people through advertising like clothing, by getting them to buy clothing, which sort of is like a way of indirectly getting them to donate to a cause. So it's let's see, it's sort of just like, why did you, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about it. I'm sort of bad at explaining it. Why did you want to build a website? Why didn't you just make one on Wix or something? I felt like it was important to like code. I felt like making my own throughout, like without like a designated builder, was more important. I felt like it was more valuable to me because it was something that I actually did, and it was like a medium I learned how to do, and it's like a valuable asset for the future, which I felt was important when I was making it. Yeah, so the gallery, so some context, the gallery is a way to display photos of like places or moments in like the world that are like usually would be beautiful, but they're covered in trash, and it's sort of showing or displaying like trash throughout the world to get people to be like desensitized to, or like to get people more aware of trash and the environment, to like sort of bring awareness to it, because I think a lot of people just see trash as part of the landscape, and I think it's important to understand that there's trash everywhere. And so that's the gallery. It's just places that are sort of tainted by trash. And then Jason says, did you take all these photographs? Yes, yeah, I took all these photographs. How did I learn to code? Why did you choose a website as a material for your final project? So I learned to code through a weekend. I just like downloaded Dreamweaver, which is like Adobe's coding web thing. And then I just sort of sat for a whole weekend doing nothing, just figuring out how it worked. And I'm notoriously really bad at coding in the past, and I never really knew how to do it. And so I wanted to like take on a challenge. And so I chose coding. And I chose a website as my final project because I could have done just like, I wanted to do something that was sort of for the future. I wanted to like do something that would have gone longer than just the final project. And so I decided to make a website so I'd continue updating it and like just moving forward with my own project independently. So something that could just keep being updated. Do you want TIPA to become an actual functioning site charity? Yeah, I do. That's sort of the whole point. I think most of my time was spent learning how to code, which so I feel like some of the construction could have been better, and I feel like some of like the overall formatting could have been a little better. But I do want it like in the future, and like when I keep updating it, it's the shop section should be functional. Like I'll be selling things. It'll be going to donating, just like different things for it. Have you become a more mindful consumer throughout this project, or has sustainability always? Well, I think when Alex gave the recycling talk to us in like the first week, it was really revolutionary. It was extremely captivating to me because I learned a ton, and he expressed like a lot of knowledge, and I was so confused. Recycling and composting was like flipped upside down, and I was really surprised that not all like different rules for recycling and different things that you think are recyclable and can't. And like 94% of Americans have access to recycling, but like only like 34 actually is properly recycled. 34% is actually recycled. So it's sort of just like crazy. I think that like really like put it into like a focus for me, how to like move forward with it. And so I sort of wanted to be more mindful of how I recycled, and I wasn't part of like the larger percent that wasn't recycling properly. Let's see. Did you think about designing the look and visual language of the website to mimic what you might find on a retail website geared towards young people? I assume you will work on this more. This is a clever idea. Yes. So I was sort of. The whole point is sort of to target young people, and so I studied various sites, and I studied various sites that like were sort of targeted towards young people, and I kept that in mind as I was designing it, and tried to just focus it towards young people through the designing. So it's going to evolve through it too. So okay, yeah, the latitude and longitude. Can you talk about the use of the latitude and longitude? What about these locations is important for us to know? Well, there's nothing inherently important about the latitude and longitude in terms of what you should know, but you could copy and paste them into Google Maps and see the place of where those photos, the collection of photos were taken. And the coordinates are sort of just supposed to be a way to show that trash is everywhere, and like many like they're just a bunch of coordinates. Yeah, like right there, like that was all taken in one place, and same at the bottom. That was just like in 100-yard radius. And like through the process of me taking the photos was pretty like groundbreaking. Well, let me answer. I don't know how many more I should answer. One more. Okay, I'll answer one more. So I think Billy says, do you believe that tricking people in today's world to buy merchandise is the only way to get them to save the planet? Well, a little bit, because it's sort of depressing. I mean, I don't know. It's like young people aren't usually charitable, and I think that's like a big drive. I mean, I don't know many. I mean, at least I don't. I've never been like, I'm gonna donate to an organization. I've never been like, oh, I'm gonna go donate to 350.org or like UNICEF. I don't know. I've never thought of that. But I think young people do want to buy clothes, and I think young people love to buy clothes, and like they love hype, and they love being trendy, and I think that the whole the whole like idea of a brand is sort of to gain reputation, and then it's supposed to gain reputation so then people will buy it. It's not, it's like tricking them, but it's also for the good. I think it's just like hard for people to be motivated to be donating, but it's not hard for them to see something that's cool or trendy or they like to buy it. I think that's like the catch. It's like making being charitable easier. So that's sort of the whole idea. Yeah, I plan to go all the way with it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so that's my thing. So yeah.
So thanks everyone for tuning in to Zoom tonight for our final project presentations, and thank you for your thoughtful questions and for supporting and raising such fine young people. I'm excited to see what's next for you all in OS42. We are going to take a short break, and feel free to join us during our next session, which is actually going to start at 5:45. So you can tune into any presentations if you want. I understand if you have a little bit of Zoom fatigue and need some rest. But thanks again for coming, and maybe we could all unmute our mics and give OS42 a round of applause.
Great presentation, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
It was great. It was great, great, great. Loved it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
So Larissa, maybe we should just keep this meeting open,
Yeah.
but take a break. Okay, sounds good.
What time?
5:45 is when the next one starts. So
But
let's.
are they gonna come 20 minutes early? That's what I'm thinking.
They might, and that would be terrible.
Okay, I'll say. I'm chilling.
No, here, you take a break, then I'll take a break.
I literally just need water.
Yeah, sounds great.
Let's just turn our mics on.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back, Chris. That went so well. Oh, you're muted. Yeah, okay. You're like, yeah, that's intentional.
I was like, of course I am. It happens once per Zoom.
Should I stop recording and then make a re-record?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Or actually, I don't think you can, but we can edit it out.
You know what should we end the meeting and then restart it?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. Ready?
Real quick. Oh.
Wait.
What?
And is it gonna, yeah, it'll just record the next one. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna end.